I went from thinking that I didn't really have any close relationships that were at least the quality of mine until I realized, oh yeah, I actually do have, and it's not that bad actually. So at least I think there are basically four different layers to this, sort of like an onion of sorts. While not perfect, I think it can give you an idea of where your friendships currently lie, as well as allow you to assess whether or not you want to spend more time and invest more into each of those friendships or relationships or connections or whatever, and whether or not you want to delve deeper and put more time into it or put it to the wayside. But hi, if you're new here, my name is Tyler. I am a part-time freelance software engineer, content creator, and game developer. And on this channel, we talk about personal development, learning, and productivity in ways that are simple yet impactful, one step at a time. Now, this first layer is borderline acquaintances to practically strangers. And this is the people that you kind of just know by face. You probably don't remember the name. You don't really know them, really. They're practically strangers, basically. This can range from people being work colleagues, friends from your school from way back when, maybe even neighbors. I don't know. Neighbors can kind of cross the line between you kind of know them, but you don't really sometimes, depending on who you're talking to. And this is the kind of people that you have small talk with. And I mean, it's just kind of that way. That's what acquaintances is. You're just kind of acquainted with the person. You kind of know their existence, but you don't really connect on a deep level. I can definitely say that a lot of the people from my high school are basically that. Like, they're good people, but I just never really connected with people on like a bigger level. And even like college or even places where I've worked, I guess. Or although I would say to some extent, given my own personal work experiences, it's been more of the second level, which I'll get into in a bit. And it's also as a reminder to be like, okay, I don't need to like everyone, right? You don't have to have everyone like me. And I guess what I'm trying to say is there is a lot of people in this world. You're not going to be friends with everyone. And I guess knowing that there's so many people and that you don't have to be friends with everyone. You don't have to be on great terms with everyone. You don't have to be friends with everyone, as I said, is a lot less pressuring, I think. Especially when you're still figuring out how friendship works, and especially outside of the school system and whatnot, when you have to manage it yourself and it's on you and the other person to actually continue a connection. But yeah, let's move on to layer 2, which is sort of a bit deeper. Not quite I don't know you that well at all, but like not very deep knowing this person either. Usually this can be friends of friends that you sort of just see because you happen to be friends with the same person. This can also be work colleagues depending on what your work dynamic is like, because sometimes smaller businesses tend to be more intimate because there's not as many people and you're always seeing the same few people. This can also be neighbors because, sometimes you can sort of see neighbors a lot and sometimes you don't really see them at all. And this is usually because of just context, like work, for instance, because you're always frequenting work. You're always going to be seeing people. You live in the same neighborhood. You're always going to see those people. I'd say this can even apply to school because a lot of the activities you do are like concert band or gym or specific subjects you're in, especially honors classes. If you're the very smart people, you tend to be in the smart people classes because you're always going to see the smart people. And this is usually, I guess, what bridges into friendships because you're always in that close proximity, right? And before we actually learn like how to make friends outside of school context, this is what we are used to, right? So it's also really hard to just make friends normally after school because you're so used to being friends from this specific point of, oh, we're in the same class. We're gonna be friends, I guess, now. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, in my case, I had a friend, and he's still my best friend. I would consider him still my best friend. It's just, we've spent so much time in school. However, he lives in Idaho, and I live in New York, New Jersey area, and obviously that doesn't work with distance, but it is a good example of how being in like a sort of the person and that person and bridging them over into the next layer, which is the closer people, which I will explain in a moment. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's close friendship. It can be close friendship in terms of experiences because you're experiencing the same stuff, but it's not necessarily because of shared interests or shared values or whatever. And it's not to say that those friendships weren't also valuable because, frankly, it means you can learn to get along with people that are completely different. And I will definitely say that friend of mine is definitely different than me in a lot of ways, but I still consider him a decent, good friend for what it's worth. But yeah, on a related note, let's move on to the third layer, which is close relationships. I wouldn't say this count, like I would definitely put family and partner and kids in like the later ones, but this is sort of, I guess, best friends, I guess. The people that you tend to be around, and this circle tends to be a lot smaller. And as you get older, I've learned that tends to be the people you see normally. Now, in some cases, like my best friend from way back in high school, that can also be a friend from this layer itself. Sometimes, especially if people stay in the same areas, the same context, that does make sense because you live together, you've known each other for years, so that friendship is so strong. I mean, it can eventually break down depending on what happens, but generally those are really strong because you end up having a lot of time invested in it. And it's definitely those friends that you don't feel judged by as much. I mean, they can judge you and still be critical about what you're doing and being like, hey, you're doing a bad thing. But it's the people that I don't, at least I think, in my opinion, I don't feel uncomfortable reaching out to and just being like, hey, how's it going? Not to say that I can't do that with the other layers, but it tends to be those people that I don't feel as awkward, and the people that I at least talk with and frequent with a lot more. In my case, though, I do find myself not being able to maintain friendships very well. I will say I do feel like I can still be on friendly terms with people, but I find it really hard to also maintain relationships that way when I'm not in proximity or frequenting or having the structure, I guess, in place. So I tend to not have as many people in that layer particularly, at least actively all the time, I think, because I definitely struggle with juggling work and my own relationships, like dating and stuff, and my partner, and then juggling with friends and having time for that is difficult. But I do think if I had to include a small handful of people, it would be the people that I game with, that I play games with, because we can joke, sometimes we say stupid stuff, and sometimes we have to remind each other that, like, okay, maybe not a good idea, but I would consider them, like, close, because we've known each other since college, and we play games, and we get each other's humor, and it's just generally a jolly time. And this is the layer that kind of reminds me that, like, I don't need that many friends. And it's always said that, like, when you get older, you have less friends. But I think it's also a lesson in quality, because you don't need a lot of friends to be happy. You just need to have a few good ones. And it does make a huge difference, because definitely in my past, I've definitely looked at friendships in terms of frequency, in terms of proximity, which in some ways proximity there's truth to that. But I think I had a bad picture of what quality friendships look like in relations. And I feel like now, being comfortable with my own space and others' spaces, I do think my perspective has changed. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, I would say this layer and the next layer, and I feel like it's stupid obvious to say, but they're like the most important compared. And it's not to say that the acquaintance and the sort of know people, like, those are important because it revolves around career, revolves around social skills, because frankly, you're not going to always be able to talk with their close ones all the time, so you have to know how to interact with the outside world, and dealing with different people and being tolerant of who they are. Granted, people aren't, being violent or, causing problems systemically or of the entire area, but those people in the close to very core people are like the most important. And with that, let's move on to the last layer, which is the core layer, which is family. And if unfortunately you don't have that, it's most likely your partner. I guess you could include your dog or your pet or whatever. It technically counts. But just the core people that make life, like, not really, I guess, worth it, but also the people that make life fulfilling. It's the people that accept you despite your mistakes, despite your weird personality quirks, that will call you out for your stupid BS and everything. I guess it's just they understand. And I guess this can also be friendships, but generally for me it's been partner and family for the most part. And it's not to say that we always will have this core, but like, because people die, obviously, we lose friends, we lose loved ones, people break up, and truthfully not everyone really gets there, which is kind of a sad thing, but also like not the worst thing, I guess. This topic is definitely hard. Ooh. But I do think if you've got that core, I think what I'm trying to say is it's important to cherish it, because it won't last forever. Like, whether it's breaking up, whether it's death even, it's important to be mindful of it and to be thankful for every moment you get with these people, because it doesn't happen very often. And yes, there's a lot of people in this world. There's 8 billion people in this world. But those moments don't happen very often because it takes a lot of time to invest in those relationships. And also what I'm trying to say is that those connections don't happen unless you put time into it. And that is one of the big mistakes. Well, I kind of understood that concept, but I think part of me was really impatient with making friends and wanting to rush things through that. I think I made them, even if they were possible, I rushed it to the point where it made it awkward and basically made it fail. Which it doesn't necessarily mean that it should fail, it just taught me that time investment is important, but being patient is also important. And knowing that sometimes, even though if you're patient, even if you put time in, sometimes it doesn't work. And I find looking at my connections with people that way helps me get a perspective on how my life is doing, I guess, or how my social life is doing, how I'm not alone for the most part. I mean, I don't think we technically are alone necessarily. I mean, we factor out social media and everything. It just gives me a good sense of where I'm at, and if there's anything that needs to be looked at, whether it's bringing some of those friends or trying to, at least from acquaintance level, to at least sort of knowing them, whether it makes sense to, whether or not I have the capacity to actually have that, because you can only have so many friends to the point where like you can't add more because you don't have time to commit, because you only have 24 hours in a day, for crying out loud. But it sort of helps me audit whether or not things are fine the way they are, and I don't need to push myself to necessarily make closer friends, or whether or not I should put myself out there more so that way I can improve those skills and then build that connection with people. And I guess I'll give that to you to see if you want to draw like a 4-ring circle of sorts, and then put acquaintance level or sort of strangers to sort of know them, close relationships, and then core, and then put all the people that you know that are applicable to this whole diagram. And then I guess see if there's people that you want to move around at some point, or that you want to invest more time in. I guess it sort of gives you a big picture, is what I'm trying to say. A big picture of the people that are in your life currently, because it's hard to see that big picture when you're just sort of piloting through life, not really looking around to smell the roses. And it gives you an idea of, oh, there are actually people in my vicinity, in my network of people that I can actually reach out to and potentially get to know better. And obviously don't try to do it with everybody. Try to with one or two people, because doing any more of that I feel like can be overwhelming at times. And of course, reach out. Honestly, I feel like most people are scared to reach out, and you'd be doing yourself and them a favor for reaching out and scheduling something to do, whether that's just going for a coffee chat or going to do an activity or whatever, really. And if you're interested, I made a video about making friends as an adult. It's totally relevant, actually, to this video about connections and circles and knowing who's on which layer. And I guess this is also a video relating to if you want to make more friends, if you're kind of a bit lonely, maybe check this video out. But yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.